Welcome to Mindshift. I'm Brandon, and today's what I hope will be a more special or meaningful video. I make these videos for all kinds of reasons: to educate, to entertain, to inform, to normalize, to sympathize. But at the root of it all has always been a goal to help people who were like me, people who are doubting their Christianity or their faith for the very first time, people who are in the process of deconstructing or deconverting. There are so many aspects to that, and there are so many pros and cons and feelings and emotions and trials and everything in the host of human experience that accompanies that, and I want to do as much as I can to mitigate the harm within that process. And so one of my first videos, I think it was video 3 or 4, and many of you may have not seen it, is "So you've deconverted, now what?" And in that video I give 10 tips to help, and one of those tips was on coming out, but I think that it deserves more detail and its own video. So today I'm giving you 7 tips to help with the process of coming out as an atheist. Some of these tips might bleed together a little bit, or you could put them in a different category, but my hope is that in covering this 7-point outline, I give you all the tools needed and all the preparation and ability to think through this to do it well. So tip 1, before we do anything, is to assess personal readiness. Now, this is going to mean a lot of things to a lot of different people depending on exactly where you are in your journey. And I think that's the first thing to understand, is this is a very personal journey. The reasons, the timing, the kind of religion you're leaving, or what sect within that religion you're leaving, where you are in the world, what culturally is going on around you, etc. The amount of variables are truly endless. So no one person's individual experience is going to represent what your experience is going to be. There are some common denominators that I want to speak about today, but you need to understand that this is your life. You can't live it for someone else. You can't live it trying to be someone else. You can't make yourself believe something that you do not. At the end of the day, it's just you, and you need to be honest with yourself. So using that honesty, let's assess. Where are you at? Are you fully sure that you have let go of that religion or that belief system? What doubts are still lingering? Are they rooted in any kind of reality, or are they just fears? Have you named them? Have you been able to address each and every one of those individually? I'm not saying you have to before moving forward in the process, but I'm telling you for your own mental stability, as the rest of this process involves typically other people getting involved and negative feedback and questions and concerns, etc. Knowing who you are right now, what you believe right now, why you believe it or don't believe it, is going to be paramount. You don't owe anyone an explanation, but I'm telling you, most of you will feel the desire, if not the need, to be able to articulate your position. If you can't do it to yourself right now, it's not going to go well under duress and questioning. Now, again, it's not on us to have everything figured out. We don't have to have an answer for every single verse or every single concept or philosophical argument. In general, atheism is a position in which one should not have to defend, because we are not making a positive claim. Many people confuse this, and many theists will purposely try to confuse this for you, but at the end of the day, atheism is just not having a belief in a particular God or set of gods. For more on this, see my video about setting the record straight on atheism. But again, don't feel like you have to have this all perfectly figured out. If you have let go of your particular belief system, I'm sure there's reasons, but you don't have to have them all ironed out, and you don't have to be accountable to anyone for them. No more than they are to you for their personal beliefs, and they're the ones making the positive claim that they know indeed a particular God exists, that they have a relationship with him, that his holy book is wholly inspired and accurate and truthful. They are the ones who would need to be able to display the validity in those claims. Your lack of belief is just that, a lack of belief, and it also does not have to be a permanent position. You might move from one religion to another. You might move from some specific religion to theism in general. You might move into something more agnostic or atheism or agnostic atheist, like I consider myself, etc. Labels are not entirely important, but there is a whole litany of experiences you can have as someone who just simply does not believe in a particular God or religion. So have you thought about all of this? Do you know where you stand? You don't have to subscribe right away to some new religion or ideology or belief system. The beginning process of all of this is that most likely you were indoctrinated into a belief or converted to a belief based off personal experience, etc., that now you are questioning, or that now you are confident is no longer correct. Your withdrawal from that can be enough. You don't have to have the next thing figured out. I feel like maybe I'm beating a dead horse here, but the biggest thing that you're going to get from the theist in your life is, so now what? So you believe what? Well, what about this? And you don't have to have an answer for that. It's just, I don't believe what you believe anymore. And if you want to provide some reasons, that I'd encourage you to figure those out ahead of time. That's all. In point 2, we're going to talk about being selective in your disclosure and your timing. But right now, while we're still addressing personal readiness, are you ready for certain fallouts? Are you prepared for negative outcomes that are going to naturally follow this? We'll talk more about preparing for those reactions in point 4. But again, right now, is it worth it to you in general to come out. Moving on to point 2, and I think this one is extremely important, and that is to be selective with whom you choose to tell, when, and how. My first point here is you do not owe anyone anything. You do not have to tell anyone if you don't want to. You don't have to write a letter to the world or explain yourself to your pastor why you're no longer showing up at church. This is your life. And what you'll come to realize is most of the people who are going to give you grief over this have their own insecurities about their own belief systems in their own life. And for some of those people, in part, is why they are acting out towards you. Now, you know your life and your family and your friends and your situation better than anyone else, so no one can tell you the right way to do this, but I'm going to give you some advice anyways. I would avoid trying to tell everyone at once. I think there's going to be some group psychology going on that come back at you, especially if everyone's gathered in the same place. I think even having to deal with multiple iterations of this issue with different individuals all at once or in the same time frame is going to be very problematic. One of my favorite atheists out there is Dan Barker. He chose to go the route of writing a letter to everyone, and he talks about that in his book Godless, and I just cannot imagine going that route. I can't imagine everyone knowing at once and having to deal with the onslaught that would come in. Personally, I went person by person. It started with my wife. Obviously, that's the first person in my life that I felt had the right to know how I was feeling. It expanded with my closest friends and then my kind of outer circle of friends. And honestly, it took me a little while and preparation and thoughtfulness to be ready to tell someone like my mom. And if you've seen my deconversion story, you can probably understand why that one was harder than some of the others. There are still people in my life right now that I've not come out to, either because it has not come up organically or because I don't think there's any benefit to it whatsoever, and I still either need or want to have some kind of relation with these people. Obviously, I've put myself out here, and if they find out, they find out, and that's something I'm ready to deal with. And many people in my life have found out because of other people in my life, not because I had a conversation with them. And you also need to be ready for that, because if you tell one person, you can essentially just count on the fact that you have told them all. You also might want to consider that if you're going to tell someone and ask them not to share that with someone else, is that putting them in a fair position? If you're telling a sibling but not another sibling, or you're telling one parent and not the other, asking them to hold that secret for you and come between their relationship with their loved ones as they would naturally discuss and talk about you might not be fair. Something to consider. You might choose to do the opposite. You might have some friends who are just kind of acquaintance levels and the topics have come up, and that might be a safe space for you to start. There's not going to be a lot of negative feedback or emotional fallout. It's just someone you can almost practice on, for lack of a better term. Again, you know your life best, and your personal experiences and relationships are what is going to dictate this most. As a side point here, I would say that timing is also crucial. Probably you don't want to do this at some big family event. Maybe you do decide you want to tell everyone at once. Christmas night probably isn't the best time to do so, and that's a silly example, but even Sundays after church when emotions are high, etc., I would just say be mindful. Or even in other instances, this isn't something that should come out during a fight, right? Like if you really want to be heard, if you really want the other person to be able to process this, then set yourself up for success and set the other person up for success. Handle some of those objections before they come out. Hey, I want to talk to you. When would be a good time to have a conversation? It's about a kind of a difficult subject. Warn them ahead of time as you're preparing for the conversation. I've got some news to share with you and you're not going to like it, but I really am hoping that you will hear me, and I promise that I will listen to you also afterwards. Maybe you're not emotionally ready to hear anyone say anything back and you need to let them know that you just want to share your piece. That's fine. This comes back to point 1 where you need to make sure that you are ready. Address your personal readiness and know what you can and what you can't handle, and that will help influence how you handle point 2. I said point 2 is very important, and I'm going to say the same thing for point 3. In fact, probably all of these are very important in their own way, but clear and respectful communication. I would challenge you to be the more mature person here. You understand something they cannot. You understand what it is, most likely, to be them. You've had this belief. You've probably seen people fall away from that belief, and you've probably judged them or had thoughts or questions or felt sorry for them or got angry at them, or a multitude of feelings and emotions that you could have had. So understand that. And the people you're choosing to tell are probably going to have that exponentially because they're close to you, because they care about you. Despite how many horrible reactions you're going to get, most of them are done out of some kind of fear for your soul, sadness for how you've been deceived, etc. It still is from a position of care, even if it is or seems unhealthy, and even if they don't handle those emotions properly. So again, because you know what it's like to be on both sides of the fence, I think that you have the sole responsibility of being the one who can handle this best. Give them an out. I understand you can't understand what this is like for me. I understand that you don't agree with me. I understand that this is offensive to you. I understand that this is considered blasphemous. I understand that you are fearing for my eternal soul, right? Like, it's just ignorant to say that God's not real. It's so silly. You shouldn't feel this way. I know the truth now. That is not going to be productive. And I should say all of this entire video is to help you have a productive coming out, to maintain relationships where possible, and to create new systems that work for you in your new life. If you don't want that, if you are one of those few angry atheists and you're so mad at all the believers around you for being so stupid and duped and for the harm that they caused you, this video might not be for you, because I don't want to encourage you to break relation in your life. I think that's only going to harm you in the process and all of the people around you. This isn't about how to get revenge on the theist in your life or anything like that. And if that's how you're feeling, I've got to tell you, look up at point 1 again, because you may not be ready to properly come out. And that sounds like a judgment call, but I'm just telling you that I think there is a not right or wrong way to do this, but a less beneficial and more beneficial way to do this. And I'm trying to guide you towards the most beneficial. I would be personal with it. I would make I statements. I wouldn't make broad, sweeping categorizations about religion or gods in general. For me, in this relationship, based off the information that I have in this particular sect of religion, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm dealing with. Not, hey, this is your fault. You raised me up like this. You ruined my childhood. You indoctrinated me. Now I know the truth, and this is so stupid. How could you do that? There's a time and place to have those conversations where you are wanting to address the hurt in your life, but I can assure you it is most likely not at the exact moment you drop this bomb, and it is indeed a bomb for most people to hear if they do happen to believe. I guess an interesting side point would be what it's like to tell someone who doesn't believe. I don't think it's going to be as problematic, and so you probably don't need as much advice, but it might be something to think about. If you've had secular friends or atheist friends or friends that are of a different spiritual persuasion who have always known that you're this hardcore Christian or whatever it is for you, and you are telling them about your new worldview and your new mind shift, then there's probably some considerations about how to have those conversations. But I think this video is more for telling the people that believed like you did, because that's where all of the issues are going to come into play. It is going to be really tempting to unpack your knowledge at this point, to say, this is how I know, and this is so wrong, and let's open the Bible, and I'm going to show you this contradiction. If they're asking and you're willing to get into that, I'd say go for it. But again, I am viewing this as an initial conversation amongst many conversations to come. I believe the purpose of the coming out conversation shouldn't necessarily be to defend your position. I think it's to share your news, to let people know what's going on in your life and who you are and what you believe, in hopes that they care about you and would want to know the truth. And they may not. And we'll talk about that right now for point 4, which is to prepare for reactions and to provide resources. And by resources, I am not meaning resources that can prove everything you just said and how it's factually true and how what they believe is factually wrong, etc. We'll talk about that in a second, but I just want to make that clear. Again, I don't think any of this should really in nature be very argumentative. So first, let's talk about preparing for reactions. What are the different reactions you're going to get? Well, depending on who you tell and how you tell and when you tell and all the things we already talked about, I think you can expect absolute rejection, hopefully acceptance, maybe indifference, maybe confusion, maybe curiosity, and everything that falls between this entire spectrum. It's important to note everyone experiences and processes information differently. Again, you might prep them by saying, I know you might need time to process this, and I'm sure that what I'm going to tell you is going to shock you. And I don't need you to even answer me or talk about this with me right now, but I would like to be able to talk about this with you, or I would like you to just know where I am, or I did want to just share my piece with you. Again, whatever your goal is. And we might have different goals. My goal with my friends and family, because of the connection, was never to be the person who was going to try to deconvert them. If anyone in my group has been open, I've definitely been willing to share. And that might sound kind of strange, being that I almost evangelize a atheistic worldview on this channel. But for people in my life that I have relationship with, I don't think for a vast majority of them, I'm going to be the one that they want to hear it from or are going to be able to receive it well from. And I'm really not just trying to get down in the weeds and muck around with people and argue back and forth. If someone wants to know more and they're genuinely curious, let's have a conversation all day. If someone really believes strongly against what I'm saying and they're asking for permission to articulate that to me and hear my thoughts back, no problem. But just to try to say, hey, I am no longer like you, and now I want you to be like me, is reversing the problem. Now, there's nuance to this because in many aspects, I really do believe that even an inherent belief in some of these religions and gods can be initially harmful, or could at least produce a lot of harm if not done in certain ways. And that by its very nature, in claiming something that it can't know and having to rely on faith, etc., produces negative outcomes. And so for people in my life that I care about, there's of course a part of me that wants to be able to share that with them. But those are later conversations regardless of how they come about. Again, initial conversation should be to share your statements, your beliefs. Think about if you want to be open to questions or criticisms. Think about if you want to have to explain yourself or not, and include that as you prepare for these initial reactions. Hey, I'm going to tell you something, you're not going to like it, you might be shocked by it, you might have a lot to say about it. Where I'm at right now is today, I just want to let you know this thing. It's important for our relationship that you know the real me. And so I'm going to share that with you today, and I still might need some time to process. So please let me know if you want to talk further, but I'm letting you know that for this purpose today, it is just to share some information with you, right? You can control this. All this really comes down to preparation, planning, and healthy communication, which is good advice, I think, in general for communicating with the people in your life or coming out as anything. But this is a highly emotionally charged aspect. And I honestly think that coming out as an atheist is one of the most dramatic worldview shifts that someone can have in their life, and has the potential to create the biggest gaps in their personal relationships and environment. In terms of the second part of this point, which is providing resources, I would not shove anything down anyone's throat. Again, it is, hey, if you're having a hard time understanding what this means and you don't necessarily want to hear it from me, or I'm not willing to discuss it further right now, here's a podcast, here's a video, here's a book, here's an article, here's a dictionary, right? So many people don't even understand some of these definitions and terminology that we're using, and you can provide these to them if they want them. Hey, I can send you some stuff. It's not necessarily exactly what I believe or what convinced me, but I think that it will explain to you where I'm at and what this worldview really means to me and looks like, and it might be able to give them some of the context necessary for you guys to have fruitful conversations in the future. Hey, I watched your video. I understand atheism is not claiming that a God cannot exist. It's just that you don't believe particularly that Yahweh is actually real because you have issues with the validity of the Bible. Based off that, I wanted to say this, right? Like, it can really heighten your guys' conversation. Point 5 is to already have this prepared. This should not be a reaction to point 4, and that is to seek supportive allies and communities. Now, this is easier said than done, because I'll tell you what, religion has really figured out the community aspect. Many of you have said in comments, and I'll share it here from my own perspective now, I do miss some of the communal aspects of religion, something that ties together. Atheists aren't tied together intrinsically. Most of us don't believe in a particular God. That's it. That's as far as it goes. Sharing morals, sharing ideologies, sharing philosophies, having a common ground of how we were raised, etc. Most of that is just not true for atheists as a group. Now, there are some wonderful communities. I mean, even just being on an atheist subreddit, and that's, there's some real bad apples in there as well, but at least you can hear other people going through. There's some normalization. Obviously, watching atheist YouTubers, my hope in running this channel is to be a place where you can chime in the comments or send me an email. So many of you sent me an email, and I try so hard to get back to all of you, and sometimes those are a little bit late, so I apologize, but so far I think I've responded to absolutely everyone who has sent me something. Whatever it is, I've tried to give you a resource or a listening ear or a shoulder to cry on, etc., and I will do that as long as I can. But as this channel grows, I would encourage you to get that through the channel itself, right? Or other people's channels. It doesn't have to be me, but there are like-minded people in the world, and you might have to work a little bit harder to find them, but I would set yourself up with some. I've seen some of you, even in my own comments on this relatively small and new channel, be able to connect, and I think that's awesome. Hey, that was my experience too. I'm going to send you a message on the side. The goal shouldn't be to find an echo chamber where finally people think just like you, and now you can all rile yourself up into this idea that we're all right. Like, I still try to approach this is there's so much I don't know. And there's so much that without that founding principle of religion and Jesus and Yahweh and the Holy Spirit and the Bible as a base, that I'm having to recreate. So I don't have all the answers there. I'm just saying, do what I'm doing. I'm seeking out community. I'm finding support systems that I can go to when I hear back from my mom about this, or I'm struggling with what I'm going to say to my kids about this, or the next conversation with my wife about that. I mean, it's hard living a countercultural life. having a countercultural belief system, which for many of us were coming from cultures of that belief system and now no longer are a part of it. Again, I have many resources listed at the bottom of each video with other YouTubers and certain websites and secular deconversion counseling, etc. I'd encourage you just to peruse that list in my description. But again, the main things you're seeking here are a source of normalization, of validation, of belonging, and of support. So keep those 4 things in mind as you're seeking out individuals or particular communities. All right, let's move on to point 6, which is coping with negative reactions, and there will be, unless you are the luckiest person on earth, and even more importantly, setting boundaries. Let's talk about negative reactions first. Again, I think the mindset should be they're going to happen and they're going to be extreme. And if they don't, great. But I think you need to be prepared. I think you need to be prepared all the way to the finality of it, which could be losing this person in your life or having a major shift in what that relationship looks like. I know people that have divorced over this. I know people that have had family members that have disowned them, friends that have absolutely left them high and dry, places of work that will no longer employ them, and the list goes on and on and on. So again, back to point 1, your personal readiness for this. Are you prepared for some of that? Because if you're not, you may want to consider if it is worth it to you to come out. For me, speaking personally, I was so afraid of the rejection. I was so afraid of the status quo changing. But for whatever reason, the prospect of those fears coming true was not enough to override the negative feelings I had about not being true to myself, about not getting to exist as I really was. It felt, again, to me, like living a lie. And the only reason that I found what I consider the truth now, which is that this particular God I was raised in is not real, is because I was so hyper concerned with the truth. So it wasn't philosophically consistent for me. So I made my choice. And I've dealt with many of the consequences that I've talked about here. And for me, they were worth it. So find out what you're willing to deal with. Find out what you're willing to lose. And hopefully you don't. And hopefully if you follow some of these tips that I'm sharing with you, it will ensure an even better outcome. But again, I think you have to prepare for worst case scenarios here. Now, I focused a lot on maintaining relationships, but there's a whole host of other things that can negatively impact you other than losing relationship. Just your mental well-being in general is going to be at jeopardy here. You're going to get an immense amount of judgment and hostility and accusation and personal attack that you probably have never had before. Are you equipped mentally to handle that? Do you have the tools and resources ready? And if not, you might want to consider thinking through this a little bit more. None of this is to scare you. People deal with negative outcomes for a billion reasons in their life, and coming out as an atheist is just another one. I think that it can act as a catalyst in having some of these issues come into your life quicker and at a higher caliber, but living life as a Christian or any other kind of believer or any other kind of ideology or just living in general is not exactly a breeze. This is all within the scope of human emotion. You just have to understand where you've been at so far in your life and what could be that might be new for you. And are you ready for that? So the second part of this point would be establishing healthy boundaries. You might not know what those boundaries are right now. That's fine. I'd encourage you to have some boundaries set up initially though. Can we talk about this or not? I think would be the first boundary as you talk to individuals or groups. Are you open for discussion or are you just wanting to share your piece? Is it fair of you to share your piece and not hear them back? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Again, you need to understand the unique and individual dynamics of your relationships to make those calls, but make that call. Have that boundary. Maybe you can only talk about it for so long. Maybe certain topics need to be off the table. I have friends where I can talk about philosophical concepts of religion and certain forms of arguments that we can talk about, but we can't talk about their personal experience. Boundaries go both ways. It's not fair for me to criticize what they claim as a personal experience they have in their quiet time or their prayer life. Are you willing to talk? How often are you willing to talk? Are there certain subjects or aspects of religion that you are or are not okay to talk about? If you have family members in your life, what are the boundaries that you are setting? For me, I have very specific boundaries with my mother on what she can talk about with my children. My wife and I get to make that call together, and we've had to enforce those boundaries. What are you going to do at the next family gathering when someone asks you to pray to bless the meal? What are you going to do the next time someone prays around you in general? How should they feel? Should they still feel okay to do that? Are you going to go to church? What if it's Easter Sunday and it's just a tradition you have to go with your in-laws, right? These are all things that you really need to think about. And while we're on the topic, I just encourage you not to draw unnecessary lines in the sand. There's a big part of you that when you first move over, you can just say, I want nothing to do with any of this anymore. I don't believe in any of it. I think it's harmful and I'm not going to support it. In no way do I want to condone it. I'm not stepping foot in a church again, etc. And I erred on that side. I wasn't quite that staunch about it. But going back to the example with my mom, there was a huge honor after 30 years of working, even if I don't agree with her work, that she received from the church. And I decided to go to that and to support her because she has worked hard. It was a big deal to her. A lot of people were honoring her, and I knew it would mean a lot for her for me to be there. And I don't think that I had to be pedantic in that moment and take some joy away from her just to remind her that I don't agree with it. I don't think that was going to do either of us any good. So again, think this out. What are your boundaries? Why? And you need to also be willing to respect others. There were some people I told who said, I just can't talk about this. I can't talk about it. All right. I guess we're not talking about it. No one owes you anything either. So let's end on a high note. Point 7, embrace this mind shift. Embrace personal growth here and authenticity. For many of you, this might be the first time where you are really feeling like you know the truth. The doubt is gone. The fear is gone. The trauma is there, but you now have the tools to deal with it. You are your authentic self. You have admitted to yourself something that was in the back of your head for years or decades, etc. Embrace that. Enjoy that authenticity. Live out of it. Become a better version of yourself. Enjoy the personal growth. Since leaving the faith, there were things that I realized, and again, I'll take all of this. I won't even put this on religion. For me, personally, as someone who cares about alleviating the suffering of others, I am enjoying doing so as effectively as I possibly can for the first time. It's not thoughts and prayers anymore. It's given in action. And that's been exciting to me as one aspect of personal growth. I've learned so much. I've always loved philosophy, but I've delved into philosophy now without this burden of bias overshadowing it, trying to figure out my personal philosophy and exactly what I believe, not just about if a God exists, but about other things and other ideologies. I've leaned in hard with history and archaeology and science to understand our world better because my old worldview claimed a knowledge of all of those things. And this might be a bigger shift for an ex-fundamentalist than it is for an ex-progressive Christian, but my world was opened up to new interest, neuroscience, something that completely fascinates me that I read about constantly now. Mental health and well-being, practices like mindfulness meditation that previously in my former life would have been grouped as some Eastern religious dogma that was a vessel and channel to let Satan get into my mind. No, I can see the scientific benefit of having a mindfulness practice now. The list goes on and on and on. I think a lot of people leave, they deal with this depression from this separation. They didn't handle their family and friends well. They didn't set proper boundaries. They weren't ready for it in the first place, and all of this caved in on them, and they're having this horrible experience, and they're acting out of that, and now they're being labeled as the angry atheist, and they're doubting if they ever did it right in the first place. And I think it's all avoidable, and I think that there is bliss on the other side. I mean, my life is not perfect now just because I admitted that I no longer believed in this God, but because I am choosing to act out of that belief and create new philosophies and ideologies and understanding what morality means to me and how I should treat people, or why I'm even concerned with that stuff in the first place, and having a better grasp on evolution and the creation of the universe, looking back at history with a different lens, etc. Like, it has been incredible, and I would wish that for anyone. And those might be my personal passions and interests and hobbies, but there's probably ones for you, and I just encourage you to dive in, embrace your new worldview. This doesn't mean flying off the handle, and this also doesn't mean throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There are aspects of who I was because I was a Christian that I don't want to just get rid of. Not every single aspect of who I was as a Christian was bad and something that I want to reverse. So be picky, be introspective, be insightful, and be fair. What parts of it were harmful? What parts were beneficial? What did it get right? What did it get wrong? Some of that is going to work for you. Some of it is going to work against you. So pick up the pretty pieces, start building a new life or philosophy or worldview, ideology, yada, 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 with whatever's left. And maybe you do need to scrap the whole thing. Do it because you needed a neutral base to start from, not because of some inward negative hate. I've been accused a lot, which I think is funny because I've been so intentional to do the opposite of having my pendulum swing from one side of fundamentalist Christianity to hard A atheist. I don't consider myself a hard A atheist. I don't consider myself to have all the answers. I'm agnostic in general. I'm an atheist about Yahweh and most of the man-made gods we've been able to identify so far, but I'm still conservative about certain things, and I'm now more liberal about other things. There's things that I feel very passionately about and very strongly about that I do know are true, and and there's things that I still don't know what to think about. And I'm figuring it out, and it's awesome. It's awesome to be free of the bias and the constraint of a religious system telling you what is absolute truth that is just a faith claim at the end of the day. So to wrap up that point, I think I would just say it as enjoy your freedom, but be responsible with it. Which leads me to maybe the last thing I'll say in general in this video, which is the responsibility part. I think that we, as an atheist, or as anyone who has really changed your position in life, it's a unique thing to do. Many people live their whole lives believing what their parents taught them, doing what their parents did, and then they die. Going through something like this, I think, gives you perspective. So be responsible with this freedom. Take advantage of your perspective point that other people do not have, and be more gracious. I think if that's your attitude and you follow some of these steps to the best of your ability, understanding your unique experiences and variables, you're going to be set up for success as much as this thing can be successful. I hope that this has been helpful. Please reach out if you need anything further. Check out the resources that I've listed below. And if you like this and you thought it was helpful, please subscribe and join the family here. And until the next one, keep thinking.